So, good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce Jane Schon, who's going to be talking to us about the voices from the Assize project. So, over to you, Jane.
Thank you very much. Oops, fingers crossed with technology that it works. Is that okay?
Not yet.
Okay. What do I do? Powers of technology.
Yeah, you tried the Alt Tab thing.
Yeah. Ooh. Sorry, everybody. It was all set up, ready to go, I thought.
Never worked with animals, children, or computers. That's definitely my motto.
That's still not there.
Not yet.
Oh. Well, it worked before, didn't it?
It did.
How very annoying.
And you're, in theory, you're supposed to be allowed to.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you go to PowerPoint with the all the slides on it and hit the escape key and close down the presentation and then start it again.
Okay.
This is where I wish I could see what's on your screen.
So at the moment I can see my PowerPoint, but
we can't.
You can't.
And you clicked on the share button on Zoom?
Yeah, I'm just going to double check. Yeah, I'm doing control screen, share screen.
It's not. Can you try sharing any other window you've got open?
Yeah, okay.
Just so we know that bit's working. Oh, we're starting to get something. Oh, there we go. That's it.
Oof,
perfect.
Oh, I can breathe again.
Yay.
Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, after that slight technical hitch. Good evening, everybody. As David said, so as some of you will know, I am the collections officer for the archive and library at Wiltshire Museum, and I've been in post for just over 5 years now. I've been working in museums for over 25 years, and during that time, although my focus has been on object collections, particularly archaeological, people have always been a key part of the story, be it who found it, who made it, how did people use it, and who lived there. I've also undertaken several oral history projects, such as bringing a Southampton church to life that was bombed during the Blitz in November 1940, and Salisbury Museum's 150th celebrations, where I interviewed several people associated with the museum to record the museum's long history. But enough about me. This evening, I'm going to talk to you about an oral history project that we completed last year called Voices from the Devizes Assize Court. I'm going to explain what oral history is and some of the pitfalls to avoid, how we went about undertaking the project during the pandemic, not the best conditions, I think you'll all agree, especially when most of the team tested positive for COVID along the way. And then lastly, the results of our project and what we discovered or found out from the voices, i.e. the people we interviewed. So what is oral history? Oral history is the recording, preservation, and interpretation of people's memories, experiences, and opinions. Everyone, regardless of their background, has a unique story to tell. Oral history allows people whose voices might not otherwise be heard to share their experiences. It is first-hand evidence of the past. Oral histories can be shared in their own right, or as part of the way we explain a museum collection, a historic building, a community, or a place. Sometimes people's testimonies contradict each other, and as we all know, memories can be selective. Interviews can also capture different viewpoints, which are often influenced by factors such as age, gender, social status, and a cultural background. But like an historical source, oral histories are open to debate, analysis, and interpretation, and that's what makes oral history challenging and exciting, and just as valuable as other historical data. Therefore, for it to be used in the future, it needs to be recorded, documented, and archived to the best possible standards for current and future generations. Oh, not that one. Where's that gone now? Sorry, everyone, that's not supposed to happen. I'm not having much luck with PowerPoint today. Right, try again. But once you've collected your oral history testimonies or interviews, what can you do with the memories? Due to the nature of the recordings, they can be used in a variety of ways, as you can see from the list here. Extracts can be copied out of the recorded interview and put into display panels for exhibitions or used in publications. If the quality of the recordings are good enough, then these extracts or snippets from the interviews can be used on audio posts or within public art trails. Alternatively, they can be incorporated into audio trails as well. They can be used in museum galleries to bring exhibits or the building to life. But what I would say is that if you want to undertake an oral history interview yourself, then do get some training first. There are so many things that need to be considered, including getting written permissions from the person you are talking to so that their memories can be used in the future. Also, you need to make sure you use the right recording equipment and think about storage for future generations. There are so many more things to think about too, but possibly one of the most important factors to consider is making sure you record in the best possible conditions, because ultimately you want to be able to hear the memories of the person you are interviewing. Now, over the years, I have listened to many oral history interviews, and I've created a list of some of the things to look out for and try and avoid. Some things are out of your control, but others can be avoided or at least minimalised. Here are just a few I have come across. Pets. Try and keep pets out of the way. May seem obvious, but there is nothing worse than having a cat purring the whole time through an interview because it was sat on the interviewee's lap, or even a parrot squawking in the background. Yes, you may think I am making this up, but it has happened. Family members, now this one is a difficult one to manage, but if possible, do try and interview people on a one-to-one basis. Sometimes people want a family member with them for reassurance, which is fine, but chat to them beforehand and ask them not to interrupt or butt in and disturb the interviewee as they're talking. They can always add something later. There have also been occasions when a wife, husband, son or daughter have popped their head in and asked if you want a cup of tea when you're mid-flow. Very thoughtful, but not what you want to hear on an interview. Now, MIM technology, as you've seen, hasn't worked great so far, so let's see how we go with this. You're about to hear a clip from a local resident talking about where he parks his car near Wadworth's, and his wife interrupts and asks if anyone wants a cup of tea. Then follows noises in the background of teacups clattering.
So Jane, I don't know if you picked that up from the chat. When I'm afraid we're not hearing the recording.
Okay. Okay, I'll have to lose them all then. I don't know how to get them to work because I can hear that fine. Okay. That was an example where the person was chatting away and his wife came in and asked her husband, who was the interviewee, and the interviewer, a cup of tea. But as that's not coming through, then looks like technology is definitely against me this evening, so we'll move on. Other things to avoid, a loud ticking clock in the room, which also chimes. If this does happen, pause as it chimes and finishes doing its thing, and then carry on when it's finished. Try and limit any traffic noise and choose a quiet room to record your interview in. You don't want cars or lorries thundering past and drowning out your interviewee. Noises from the interviewer during an interviewee. Start again. As an interviewer, try not to make any noises whilst the interviewee is speaking. No mms or I see, etc. When interviewing, you become a bit like a nodding donkey. You end up doing a lot of smiling and a lot of facial expressions to show you are listening and understanding what they are saying. The goal is to hear the interviewee, not you. But sometimes having external noises in an interview is a good thing because it brings an atmosphere to the person's memories. Also, you may actually want to record the background anyway, such as the hustle and bustle of a street or the noise of birds and wildlife. We interviewed one gentleman actually inside the Assize court, and during his interview, in the background, you can hear dripping water and the crunching of his footsteps as he walked around, and there's the faint hum of traffic outside. You may think it's odd that I've put a fridge on here too, but some electrical appliances such as fridges can hum. This can be picked up on a digital recorder as background noise. An old colleague of mine interviewed some footballers in a football stadium's hospitality suite and only realised afterwards that the drinks fridge in the corner hummed the entire time during those interviews. And lastly, hearing aids. Once I interviewed a very interesting lady about capturing a photo of King George VI in 1939 whilst hanging out of a window, and afterwards discovered there was a high-pitched whistle throughout the entire recording. I realised it must have been her hearing aid, and thankfully, because it was a constant noise, I could identify it and remove it from the recording. These are just a few of the problems I have heard or encountered. Now I make a recording of the room before we start speaking to pick up any potential background noises. These can then be highlighted in the editing software later and removed. So that was a very brief overview of what oral history is, how you can use it, and some anecdotes from my experiences. And I apologise that the sound clips don't seem to be working. To know more, I would recommend visiting the Oral History Society website, where there's a wealth of information, advice, and they also run training courses. The Society also has regional advisors, and we were lucky enough to work with them on our project. The idea for this project started towards the end of 2020, after museum staff had been discussing the museum's future plans to move into the Assize Corp over several Zoom calls. We wanted to record memories of the people who had worked and been inside the building when it was a working courthouse, and to add a voice to the building. It was our way of bringing the current derelict building to life, but we knew we had to act fairly fast because our potential pool of interviewees were going to be quite elderly now, as the Assize Court closed in the early 1980s. We did some quick calculations and realised if you had been working in there during the 1960s, say in your 20s, then you were likely to now be in your late 70s or early 80s. So we had to get a wiggle on. To deliver this project, we applied for a grant from the Arts Council National Lottery Projects Grant Scheme. Writing the application form was by no means easy because it was during lockdown 3 and we were forced to stay at home again. Much of the brainstorming and discussions for the project took place over Zoom in the evenings, once our children, or at least mine, had gone to bed. The funding application was submitted at the end of June 2021, and a month and a half later, we found out that we had been successful. As with all funding applications, when you hear you have been successful, there's a great sense of relief and excitement that you can go ahead and do your project. However, on the flip side, the realization soon hit home. Oh my goodness, we now have to deliver an oral history project during a pandemic. Now, normally, or pre-pandemic, oral history interviews are conducted in people's homes or in a place where they feel comfortable. But obviously, living through the pandemic and several lockdowns later, we were all being told to keep our distance. So we had to consider how we were going to record people's interviews safely, both for the interviewee and for us, the interviewers. Risk assessments were compiled and alternative ways to record were researched, such as using Zoom to record interviews online. So now that we had the money, we had to get going. In order to ask informed questions of our interviewees, we needed to do some research. A couple of the museum's archive and library volunteers started to work on this. One looked into creating a timeline of the Assize Court from when it was first built in 1835 to present day. This involves searching online catalogues at the Wiltshire and Swindon History Centre, the National Archives, and the museum's own online database, the builder of a picture of the building's history. It also helped us to find out where other information was kept and other potential sources to be investigated if we had the time and money. Another volunteer started working his way through the British newspaper archive online database. Again, this meant trawling through the online databases and finding any references to articles mentioning Devizes Assize, Assize's Devizes, and Assize Court's Devizes. Then each potential record and newspaper article was skimmed to see if the article was relevant. His results were collated into a large spreadsheet and recorded under these themes. There were 92 articles relating to the construction and maintenance of the court building, over 1,000 articles relating to civil and criminal trials held at the Assize courts. Under court admin, we had 305 articles which related to routine notices about the running of the court, such as announcements of the start of a new session, which for Devizes was usually during the winter. And then finally, 95 other articles which did not fall into the above categories, or it was not possible to decipher the whole content. Altogether, he identified just over 1,500 references to newspaper articles spanning 140 years. The earliest article was in the Bath Chronicle, dated October 1833, detailing steps to hold the Wiltshire Assizes and Devizes. The latest was January 1970 and recorded the trial of 9 teenagers who were charged with causing an affray. We were also intrigued to know who had contributed to building the Assize Court in 1835. It was thought the list had to be somewhere in the museum archives, and only when I was looking for something else did I find it. A public subscription was set up in April 1834, and residents of Devizes were approached to pay a sum of money towards funding the erection of the Assize Court building. Amounts ranged from £500, which in today's money is about 51,500, to £1, which is about £100 today. On average, each subscriber paid £10.38, which is about £1,000 in today's money, which I think goes to show how strongly the residents of Devizes wanted the Assizes to be held in Devizes and not just Salisbury. Here are just a few of the names listed and the amounts they paid. The top one, Admiral Sir Philip Durham, he paid the most at £500. Then the third Marquis of Lansdowne paid £200. Colonel Hicks Beach, £50. Reverend T.A. Methuen paid £50. George Elgar Sloper paid £50 as well. W.E. Tugwell Esquire paid £30. Mr. Anstey paid £20. And over 230 people paid £1. And here are just a few of the names I've picked out. Joseph Abraham, Mr. Edward Barton, Mr. J. Duck, Miss Guppy, and Mrs. Vines. The list of 11 handwritten pages is now being transcribed by an archive and library volunteer, and the names listed are being researched. Who knows, maybe a member of your family contributed to the cost of the Devizes Assize Court being constructed. Alongside this background research, we started the process of trying to recruit interviewees to share their memories and connections to the Assize Court building. Announcements were made online via the museum's website, Twitter, Facebook, and to members of WANS. Press releases were sent to the Wiltshire Gazette and Herald, but unfortunately, these never made it into print. Bigger stories to compete with on the day, sadly. However, we did have a stall in the Shambles on Market Day to highlight the project. Leaflets were made to distribute. And David mentioned the project at any talk he gave in the hope people would come forward. The take-up was slow, but people did eventually come forward. But to deliver this project, not only did we need to find people to interview, we also needed help to deliver it. We worked with several supporters and partners, all of whom had a key part to play. Firstly, Bath Spa University were a huge supporter, and in particular, the students on the MA Heritage Management Studies course. As part of their course, we offered a museum orientation day to give students the chance to go behind the scenes, talk to curators, and be introduced to oral history. At the same time, we also spoke about the project and the opportunity to get first-hand experience of working with oral history. 2 students came forward and undertook a placement with us for 4 months. They gained valuable experience working within the museum and archive and on an oral history project. Both students did 4 oral history interviews each. They transcribed the interviews and edited sound clips to be used online. They assisted with the project research too, searching the archive and library collections, poring over the newspaper cutting books, and searching filing cabinets of photos, highlighting anything we had in the collections that complemented the oral history interviews. They also created content for the project web pages and wrote blogs about the work they were doing. Assisting us from the very beginning was Padmini, who I had worked with in Southampton during the early 2000s. She helped us create a budget for the oral history side of the project and trained us in how to do oral history interviews and create oral history archives. For the MA students, she also acted as a mentor and offered guidance when required. Later, she helped me write and pull together the book. There are not many people who you can call upon at 11:30 at night whilst drafting a book and ask random questions such as, is this the right plan to use here? Or should we use this photo? She was brilliant and very, very supportive. Lastly, we worked with Heather, a local artist and designer based in Purton. She managed to work her magic and create the final book on the project. She designed the front cover based on my vague ideas and helped us create the banner that is attached to the railings outside the Assize court today. We now had the project team set up, research was ongoing, and a list of potential interviewees had been compiled. Using our research, we created a list of questions to guide us through the interviews and pulled together some resources, such as building plans and photos to use in the interviews in case we needed to jog people's memories, or if we wanted to clarify things, such as where a particular room was. We also had our timeline, which helped us know what was happening when the interviewee was working there. It gave us some background or context to the events or people mentioned in their interviews. So who did we interview? After a slow start, we eventually have a list of 41 people to potentially interview. A couple of people dropped out or did not return our calls or emails, which is normal. But so far, we have interviewed 23 people, which has amounted to 20 hours of oral history testimonies. As you can see from this list, we interviewed a wide range of people, covering all sorts of topics, from maintenance work carried out on the building structure, past and present, how a court runs, to who does what in court, memorable moments and anecdotes, including the numerous characters who worked in there, descriptions of what the building looked like inside and what happened to it afterwards. Everyone had a unique story to share with us. The architect, builder, technical assistant and surveyor gave us an overview of the building, what work they had been involved in inside the Assize courts and other building projects within Devizes. A local historian shared his knowledge of the building and photos for the project. He also told us how workmen clearing the building had allowed him to rescue a capstan inkwell from a skip. And during January 1985, there had been an open day and crowds of people had turned up to go inside the building. 2 councillors came forward and gave us a different aspect to the building. One had tried to save the Assize Court in the early 1980s to create it into an arts hub and was interviewed inside the building. You can hear the emotion and the sadness in his voice at the state of the building today. The other had more recently been involved with the plans to redevelop the Devizes wharf area. Two local residents who live in one of the terraced houses next to the Assize Court shared their memories of past plans, including the suggestion of making it into a nightclub and discovering that youths had made a skateboard ramp inside the main entrance after it had fallen into disrepair. We interviewed a trustee from the Devizes Assize Court Trust who shared memories of his ancestors' connections to the Assize Court and gave us lots of helpful background information into how the Devizes Assize Court Trust acquired the building. We also interviewed a number of court professionals, including a barrister, now a KC or a King's Counsel, a magistrate and solicitors, all of whom started their careers in the Assize Court. They all shared their experiences, described the building interior, which had long since gone, including the royal crest that was behind the judge's bench in both courts, and the wooden panelling, which was no doubt used as firewood when the building fell vacant. But helpfully, they also explained the court system and their roles within it. Our young barrister at the time described the courts and behind the scenes in the robing room, which were very chatty places. He also presented in two of formidable judges whose names kept popping up, Lord Desmond and Desmond Bowden. Our magistrate was believed to have been the youngest in the country to be sworn in the Assize Court in 1969. She caused quite a stir in her miniskirts, even making the headlines. Well, it was the 1970s. And one defendant wolf whistled at her while she was outside court and got the fright of his life when he realised she had been one of the magistrates in court. Our other court professionals were two solicitors, one of whom presented in the Assize Court when newly qualified, having sat in the courts as a youngster watching his father present. The other solicitor had very fond memories of the Assize Court too, and emphasised the strong links it had with the local people. Our one and only defendant talked about her appearance in court on a minor driving offence. She described how they weren't going to lock her up and that she just felt a bit sheepish and should have known better. Our two jurors described their experiences, the cases they served on, and what it felt like to be a member of the jury, including the weight of responsibility that you were going to decide someone's fate. Many interviewees describe other court professions too, including the probation officer. As one interviewee said, a good probation officer was worth his or her weight in gold to the judge because the judges learnt to trust the probation officer. We were lucky enough to interview a probation officer who had worked in the Assize Court during the 1970s. She explained her role and what it was like giving evidence in court. We interviewed two police officers who described the police station, which used to be inside the Assize Courts on the right, and the old-fashioned switchboard they used. They also told us they had to wear a formal uniform, including white gloves when in court, and occasionally urgent files were delivered by local bus drivers on their daily routes. Within the museum's archive, we have an existing oral history archive of nearly 60 interviews. One of these interviews from a Gazette and Herald reporter held amazing memories that inspired the project. His name was Terry Gaylard. He gave a fascinating insight into the workings of a court from the eyes of the press, described some of the people who worked there, and inspired us to find out more. He was a great storyteller, but sadly passed away in March 2021, just as we were writing the funding application. But people's interviews also brought to life other people who were no longer around to tell their story. We heard about the caretakers, Arthur Wiltshire, known as Titch, and Ralph Hooper, formidable judges, news reporters, the town crier, a head gardener, Lady Anne Cowdrey, whose house Broadleys was used by judges to stay overnight, and some of the notorious cases. Even though we could not interview them, we could still give them a voice by reading their diaries, finding them in the newspaper cutting books, and putting a face to the name. Sir Harry Hilton Foster QC was a Solicitor General and represented the Crown in a murder trial held at the Assize Court in January 1955. Lord Patrick Devlin was a renowned lawyer, judge, law campaigner, chairman of the Wiltshire Quarter Sessions, and lived in Westwick House near Pewsey. Desmond Bowden QC was a judge, chairman of the Wiltshire Quarter Sessions, and the last Devizes recorder in July and November 1971. Lord Vivian and Mavis Wheeler, whose court case made national headlines between July and October 1954, when Mavis Wheeler, former wife of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, was on trial for shooting Lord Vivian at her cottage in Potton. Thomas Seymour was a head gardener for Mrs. Thomas in Roudford and planted the bay trees that used to be outside the Assize Courts in 1934. His granddaughter read us extracts from his diary. And lastly, we have Sidney Dowse, the Devizes town crier, a position he held for 24 years. He called out the Assize sessions, was the mayor's officer, and the official ale taster. So that gives you an overview of the people we interviewed and some of the amazing memories they shared with us. But what did we do with those memories? What were the results of the project? As I said, overall, we recorded 20 hours of oral testimonies from 23 people. These will be added to the museum's existing oral history archive for future generations to enjoy. We produced a 56-page illustrated booklet, which includes quotes, photos, and background information about the Assize Court, and is a lasting legacy of those who we interviewed. All those who took part received a complimentary copy at the project celebration and were seen searching through the pages, trying to find their bit. It was lovely to see, and both Padmini and I found it very rewarding. 6 temporary exhibition panels have been created and are currently on display at the Palace Cinema and Devizes. Each panel was filled with quotes from our interviewees, alongside some images, and cover the following themes: the courts in session, in the dock, pomp and ceremony, the building, the end, and the beginning. It is hoped these panels will be taken out into the community during the summer. We created web pages on the museum's website for the project. Here we placed updates and sound clips from the interviews. The MA students also wrote some blogs about what they were doing and what happens during an oral history interview. Copies of the exhibition panels have now been added too, along with a link to buy the book. And investing in the future, we trained 2 MA students from Bath Spa University who gained skills in oral history in the museum sector. At the end of their placements, both students had vastly improved their confidence and felt confident enough that in the future, they would be able to explain the process and equipment required to undertake oral history. During their placements, they were also given the chance to talk to other members of staff about their roles in the museum and improve their knowledge of the museum sector. One student enjoyed it so much, she returned for a longer placement during the summer, working on another archive project. Both have since graduated, and one is now working for the National Trust, whilst the other will shortly be starting a job in archives. Throughout the project, David has been continuing to deliver talks about the Assize Court plans to a wide variety of groups and holding open days when possible. At any given opportunity, not only is he talking about the redevelopment plans, but also the work we achieved from this project. Several interviewees came forward after hearing David give a talk. But we could not have done this project without the kind generosity of so many people who were willing to share their memories and bring the Assize Court to life. We all battled with technology together, and some of you were kind enough to let us into your home to record your memories. Without you, we would not have been able to make this project a success. And who knows, in maybe 10 years' time, your voices will be heard again inside the Assize Court when the building gets a new lease of life as the new home for Wiltshire Museum. Fingers crossed. Lastly, I'm going to finish with two of my favourite photos from the project. Now, when you interview people, you never really know what people are going to say. These two photos came from one of our interviewees who worked in Northgate House opposite the Assize Court between 1969 and 1970. The photos may not be good quality, but they tell a great story. Bear with me as I read from the book, because I don't think the sound clip will play. I'm not going to trust technology again. These are his words. About 10 o'clock, his lordship would arrive in all his robes and wigs, and various clerks would come and stand in line on the steps to welcome him. The state trumpeters would start up, and the judge would be escorted into the court. And that's when it started to turn into a farce. Because as soon as he'd gone inside, the trumpeters just shot into the White Lion, not to be seen for a couple of hours. We didn't see much else then, until they came out of the White Lion to escort his lordship down the steps and into his car away for lunch. They were certainly playing pretty poorly at this point, because they had obviously had several pints. Also, I should thank everyone else who worked on the project. Our MA students, Helen and Linda, our volunteers, Bethany, James, Mike, Sandy, Sarah and Veronica, Rachel, the museum's development officer, Lisa, the museum's curator, and other members of staff, including Emma, Karen, Nicola, and of course, David. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane. I have to say, I've not listened to all those recordings yet. I really ought to get them on my phone and listen to them when I'm on my way to and fro the museum. I just wonder, I've got some of them up. I just see if I can get one of them to play, just so you get an indication of what they sound like. But as Jane says, all the recordings are available on the selection of recordings are available on the website. So I'll just try one. This one is Shoplifting Bacon from Terry Gaylard, if it'll work. And can you hear that? Right, apparently you can't hear that, so it was worth a try. best luck. These things don't always work. So and also Jane seems to have disappeared. We really are doing well this evening. We've got one question on the Q&A at the moment. Right, good. Jane, you're back. You just
Yep,
disappeared. We
sorry,
really are
dropped
doing
out
well with the
completely.
technology, aren't we? So Peter has said, did you film any of the interviews?
No, we didn't film anybody. Nobody wanted to. So we just recorded them using a handheld digital recorder.
Yeah, I know that people are often really reluctant to be filmed. You have to be persuaded to do that, and it's a real barrier, because people think if you do want to film them, then they really don't want to take. They might not take part at all. Doing a recording is a bit more straightforward. So, does anyone else have any questions? I have to say, the interview I like best is that one with Terry Gaylard, where he talks about a lady who was done for shoplifting, and what she'd done was go into a shop and hide a side of bacon beneath her skirts, and then was arrested just outside the shop with the side of bacon underneath her skirt. And was she found guilty? Yep, of course. And does anyone have any other questions? No? Okay. Well, what I'll do then is I'll see if I can bring up my the talk I was going to do, which of course, there we go. So I'm just going to do, those of you who would like to listen, I'm just going to do a very quick overview as to where we are with the project. So I'll just share my screen with you. Now that's interesting. Now, can you see the Assize court? So you can see a PowerPoint presentation?
Yep.
Yep, good, okay.
Mm-hmm.
It looks to me as though Zoom has changed the way they do things since we did our practice, Jane. So yes. I don't think it's you.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
I think Zoom have changed something, as it's not working as it would normally. And I've done quite a few talks, so yeah, that had me confused. So just to highlight where we are at the moment. So this, as you will know, the Assize Court building was purchased by the Assize Court Trust in 2018. And in 2019, we announced that the museum and the Assize Court Trust were going to be working together on a project to restore the building. We commissioned architects who came up with this as a sort of a first pass onto how the building might work, with an extension out the back to make it suitable for the museum. Unfortunately, since then, we've had a few little bumps in the road. This thing called COVID, you might have heard of, plus plus inflation, particularly in building costs, means that what I would like to have done has just become what the plans we came up with were just completely uneconomic and were just not going to happen. The other thing is that the model we were using was based on Dorset Museum, where they had a very generous grant from the Heritage Fund, but now they will only award a maximum of £5 million, which with inflation was about 3.5 million in 2019. So you can see how much that has changed plans. We then also commissioned audience development work during lockdown, but we're in a completely different world. Now, what that means is that we can't afford, there's no way that we can do extensions out the back. So we really have to cut the project down to its absolute basics. And where we are is that we are looking at working purely within the historic building. You see in the top left, we have a learning center that's for schools and education groups and workshops for out of hours and things like that. lecture room and multi-use event space, and then galleries on the ground floor, welcome desk and shop, and small cafe area at the back end of the entrance hall, and then an extension out the back with tables and chairs for when the weather's nice and sit out. And then flooring in both the main Assize court and also the magistrates court for gallery space and offices and things. Now, these are very much initial plans because we've been successful in being able to apply to the Heritage Lottery Fund, and we'll be working those plans up in more detail if we're successful in the bid we're about to put in. So in developing those plans, we've had to make all sorts of difficult choices and compromises, and some of the things we really wanted to do, we just can't. So one of the most difficult ones was realizing that we can't provide access to the cells underneath the Assize court at this stage. But what we are planning is that we will attempt to do everything, but it'll be over at least two additional phases, which will come after we've got done the initial work. So this is a broad overview of where we are in the process. The big tick is that the Heritage Fund approved our expression of interest, which means that we can apply for funding. That bid is due in on Thursday at midday, come hell or high water. We've had some interesting routes to get there, but that's the timescale. And Nicola particularly has been coordinating the bid and beating everyone. Doesn't sound quite right, does it? Encouraging people to make sure they do what they said they would, which is mainly me, and really liaising with everyone to make sure we've got all the information we need. We're going to be at least 500 pages worth in that application, so it's enormous. So that gets submitted in a few days' time. We then hear the result. We know now is going to be in the beginning of July. And if that's successful, we're awarded funding to work up our plans in more detail. And that stage lasts 2 years. We then apply then for the rest of the money, the rest of the 5 million, which means we can get on with actually doing the project. In the meantime, we've got to raise the extra cash. So if anyone's got £1 million or £500,000 to spare, I'm sure we can help them. In the meantime as well, since 2019, the Wadworth announced that they're moving production to the outskirts of town, and a developer has come to an agreement with them and has come up with some initial plans for how the site might work and the housing development that will go onto the site once brewing has moved, and that's due to happen later in the spring for the move of brewing. The developers saying that they're intending to put in a planning application over the next few months and to start construction within the next year to 2 years, something like that. But hopefully what's guiding all that is the wharf development strategy developed by Wiltshire Council, which sees the arch under Wadworth linking through to a vibrant brewery courtyard with shops and cafes and things like that, leading down to the back of the Assize court and the canal, creating a vibrant link between the marketplace and the canal, with a footpath alongside the canal, bringing people from the canal into the town. So it's a major regeneration project. So that's everything I wanted to say about the project, where we are now. I'm happy to try and answer any questions if anyone's got any. In the meantime, much more interesting, you've got one from Penny who says, is the project closed or are you still collecting stories?
Officially, yes. Well, the funding has finished, but I think with any oral history project, you can never say never, because there are always people who hear about what you're doing, you hear about what other people have done, or they talk to an interviewee and say, oh yes, I want to be part of that. So no, it hasn't stopped. We still actually have some people to interview who came forward originally. We don't have the students to help us now, but we will still try and record people's memories and add to our oral history archive. And who knows, maybe there'll be more stories that we can add to the Assize Court. So if people know someone or you have a story to tell, then get in contact with us and we will arrange an interview with you.
Perfect answer. I know you've got a couple of people for me lined up to talk to, haven't you?
I do.
For my sins. I don't know what I've done to deserve that, but never mind. Okay, so any questions from anyone else? Last chance? Sounds a bit like an auction, doesn't it? Okay, well, in that case, thank you ever so much, everyone, for coming, and it's been interesting, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Do look at the booklet, visit the website, and play the recordings. Some of them are great fun. They'll have you in stitches. So thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, Jane, for an absolutely fascinating talk, and see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.